The Edwards Syndrome Association is a 100% volunteer 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to advocacy, equal care, education, and rights of people with Edwards syndrome. The ESA strives to empower parents to advocate while working to help break barriers for those with Edwards syndrome. This podcast is for educational purposes only. For all medical advice, please speak with your medical providers. Thank you for joining us and for breaking barriers with us.
Welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast, where we talk all things Edwards syndrome, special needs, therapy, disability, and everything in between.
Welcome back to the Breaking Barriers podcast. We're sitting down today with a courageous mother as she shares the extraordinary medical journey of her daughter, Mia, who was born with full trisomy 18, from cardiac defects and seizures to pancreatic insufficiency and apnea. Mia's story is a powerful testimony of resilience, advocacy, and love. We explore the complex challenges her family faces, including hydrocephalus, urinary retention, seizures, and conductive hearing loss, alongside the daily realities of G-tube feeding and catheter care. Through it all, Mia's strength and her mother's unwavering devotion shine a light on the possibilities of life beyond a diagnosis. This episode offers hope, guidance, and solidarity to families navigating rare and medically complex journeys. You're not alone, and every story deserves to be heard. So let's welcome my co-host, Crystal Simpson, and myself, Kelly Peterson, and our courageous mother, Jeanna Polachek. How are you today, Jeanna?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So when did you first learn that Mia had trisomy 18, and were there any signs or complications doctor shared with you?
Yeah, so we were actually one of the rare cases where we did not find out in utero about her trisomy 18. Honestly, her pregnancy, she was my firstborn, so I felt like it didn't seem normal, like the whole pregnancy, but I didn't know any better. So, the pregnancy seemed, I was told everything was good, so I never had concerns besides like the typical nausea and a lot of nausea, but nothing like over the top concerning. Fast forward though to like the middle of the third trimester, and it was around that time where they started noticing that she was just not growing. And that was when they referred us over to the MFM team. And so that same day I went over to the MFM team. They did an ultrasound, and this was actually done by a tech because I went to like one of their satellite offices and the doctor wasn't there that day. So the tech did it, the doctor reviewed it, and then the doctor called me while I was still in the office. And it was weird because he's like, I feel like she's just a small baby. I don't notice anything alarming, but I could just tell in his voice that he wasn't certain. And he said, but I would like to do the ultrasound myself tomorrow when I'm at that office. So we went back the next day and he did the ultrasound. And it was great for the first couple of minutes while we kind of, got acquainted. And then all of a sudden he got very silent and he was not saying anything. So I eventually said, "Is everything okay?" And it was at that point that he said, "She has a very large hole in her heart." And I just like broke down because I didn't even understand what that meant. I didn't understand if that meant, she wasn't going to survive. And so then he was like, "I will, draw a picture for you when we're done. I will tell you exactly what's going on. We'll get you over to cardiology." That same day they got us over there. They did their own ultrasound. They explained everything and reassured us that, what they were seeing was totally fixable, not a big concern. But they suggested we deliver at a different hospital where if she needed emergency surgery at birth, they could take care of that. So we then switched different hospitals, but this MFM team continued to kind of drive things for us, and kind of made the call on when to induce her and everything like that. Again, everything was seemingly fine. They weren't noticing anything on the ultrasounds. my non-stress tests were all pretty normal, I think. They never told me they weren't, and everything was good. The only thing that kind of stood out as a red flag to me was it was honestly, I think, our last appointment before I was being induced, or maybe like two appointments before, the MFM was like, do you want to do an amniocentesis? And I didn't even know what that meant, but I was like, well, what would that tell us? And he's like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't think it's necessary because I don't think that this is lethal. And it kind of just went
You
over
were
my
like,
head, but
what?
I remember it like caught me off guard enough to like really bother me. And like I said to my husband, Robert, I'm like, something's off. Why did he say that? What does that mean? And it just was weird, but we kind of like let it go, didn't think anything of it. We delivered her, which is a whole story in itself that I won't get into. And they apparently saw signs and markers of trisomy 18 at birth that we, again, were not aware of. They didn't disclose this to us. Here, we thought she was just a tiny baby that had this heart defect and she was going to be followed by the cardiac team to determine when she needed surgery, and they were going to help her grow in the NICU and everything would just be, great. And then at 2 days old, I believe it was, we got a call from genetics. I was actually in the parking lot at Target trying to go buy pads because I just delivered a baby. And I got this call from a hospital number. And so, of course, I answered it right away. And she's like, I'm so and so with genetics. And I was so caught off guard because I'm like, again, I didn't even really understand like the genetics department and what that meant. And she just kept going on and on about like what they were testing Mia for and what they're highly suspicious of, and that they should have the official results back the next day, and asked me if I wanted to know what they thought it was. And I was just like, I don't really want to know anything until, for one, I'm not in the parking lot of Target and I'm sitting down with people that can help us navigate this. I'm like, but for two, I don't really want to know anything until you have the official results because I just don't want to go down those rabbit holes. And she
Mhm.
still proceeded
Yeah.
to say, like we feel like she has trisomy 18 and just know that she's going to have a shortened life. Don't Google it. All the horrible things that so many of us hear. And so I like didn't even take her off. Like I didn't even put her on speaker at this point. My husband's sitting next to me and I'm like just distraught at this point. I hang up the phone. He's like, what the heck was that? And I tried to like muscle telling him something about what just happened. And so of course that whole night we spent at Ronald McDonald House and I sat there and I didn't sleep and a wink. I Googled trisomy 18 the whole night. I was told that there was nobody out there with it. So I never thought to like go to the Facebook groups. I just Googled it and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I think she does have this. And the whole next day I was just a wreck. And this was a Saturday. And so then it's like 4 o'clock on a Saturday. So I'm like, she hasn't come yet. Like, this has to be good news. Like, she doesn't have trisomy 18. And then it's like after 5, and here she comes by herself. No chaplain, no doctors, no social worker, nobody's with her. So I'm like, okay, she's alone. Like, she's gonna say she doesn't have it. Like,
Oh,
she
good
sits
news.
down. Exactly. She sits down and she goes, she does have trisomy 18. She has full trisomy 18. And of course, like I had been Googling it the whole night. So I just immediately break down, like almost vomiting all over myself. And she just keeps going and going and going about like how awful Mia's life would be and how, we were lucky she even survived birth, survived to where she was, that it'd be a miracle if she made it through the night and through the week and all those horrible things, and that we should just take her home and let her, live out her time. And um, that's essentially how we got the diagnosis of trisomy 18. And yeah,
That's just insanity. That's like no couth or
yeah,
empathy.
it was
Hmm.
awful.
So after you were told this trisomy 18 diagnosis, were there any immediate changes in like doctors' attitudes toward Mia because of this new diagnosis?
Honestly, no. Now I might have a different answer if I like relived that now, like knowing
Hmm.
what I know now and
No,
like my
yeah.
experiences and understanding. But at the time, like I never got vibes that, they were changing or doing anything different. Honestly, like we had some pretty good doctors that, really seemed like they cared. I remember one of them who we had quite a bit, he is the one that asked us about a DNR, and he never like pushed it on us. He's like, you need to take the time. I want you to make this decision for you. And because I started crying when he brought it up, and like he like came and like knelt next to me and like kind of like put his hand on his shoulder, like show he like actually cared. And he's like, you don't have to make the decision now. Like, she's full code until you tell us otherwise, and like was just very respectable about it. And the cardiac team was phenomenal the entire time. There was actually one point where they would come in every morning because she was one of those kids that they were probably going to have to intervene on the earlier end. And each morning we kept getting good news and good news, which was great because she was born at 3 pounds 4 ounces and dropped to 3 pounds. So it was kind of like they didn't want to do surgery and we didn't want them to do surgery until it was absolutely needed. And so there was one morning where they were actually there with that same genetics counselor, and he's like, yeah, her heart's looking good, like we don't feel a need to intervene or anything like that. And that genetics counselor chimed in and was like, but she has trisomy 18, right? And that cardiac doctor actually like looked at her and said, I am here for her heart and I am going to focus on her heart, and basically like said, like your thoughts right now, like that was totally uncalled for. And
Wow.
I will always remember that doctor, fully respect him. So we had a lot of doctors that were like that. So no, I wouldn't say anything changed once we got that diagnosis, thankfully.
That's good. So you obviously mentioning that she had a heart condition. Can you describe what kind of cardiac defects she had? Like, was it a VSD, ASD? Like, what was going on with her?
Yeah, so she had a very large VSD. And so they also didn't know like if she was going to have anything with like her aortic arch and stuff when she was born. Thankfully that was all not an issue. But they didn't know for certain in utero. And so it was mainly just the VSD that they were monitoring. And thankfully it was good for about 2 weeks, and then at that 2 week mark her lungs were starting to flood. It was clear like they needed to intervene. And kind of going back to the doctor's perspective, like we didn't know any better. Like she was
Mhm.
never really breathing that great, but like she was keeping her O2 up, like everything was pretty good. Like she never needed intubation, she was just on high flow. But like she was working harder to breathe, and we just didn't really know like what that, we thought it was
What it looked
normal, I
like.
guess. And so like they
Yeah.
told us, they're like, she's not breathing well, like her breathing has changed, her lungs are flooding, like we have to act very soon. And so like they made that call, but again, she was only 3 pounds at this point, and so they didn't want to do the full repair. So they actually determined that they would do pulmonary artery banding on her, which for the listeners that may not know what that is, it's kind of like a band that they put on the pulmonary artery to help like the blood flow. And it's kind of like a palliative approach, I guess you would say. But essentially, in Mia's case, their thought process was that would buy us time for her to
Her to
grow. And
get
then we
bigger.
would, yes, and then we would go into the full repair. And so she had that done at 15 days old and exactly 3 pounds. She rocked it. We were in the cardiac ICU for I want to say 5 days, and then they transferred her back to the NICU. And then it was kind of just like helping her grow a little bit, and stuff like that before we were discharged, to continue to grow at home.
That was great. She did good.
She
How
did.
did you already focused on her breathing, how big she was during the first heart surgery. Um, how did her heart condition influence like her energy or her feeding?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to like think. So she, like going back to her NICU days, like she did take a bottle a little bit before her heart surgery. She actually breastfed a few times, and she would latch, and I don't know how much she was getting, but she would do it. And then even after the pulmonary artery banding, that's a tongue twister. Um, she she was pretty good still at like taking the bottle and stuff. It was kind of more so after her open heart surgery at about 4 months when we stopped seeing her take the bottle. Um, I believe it was at that point. Gosh, it's so hard to remember kind of back to all those
Mm-hmm.
days now. But in terms of energy, I I don't remember the NICU honestly, like because it was such a blur. But she did kind of become more active, I want to say, after the pulmonary artery banding. But definitely after her open heart surgery, like it was an immense difference.
Like night and day.
Yeah, especially with her breathing. But she did have to come home after her open heart surgery on oxygen. So she was still struggling a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. That was a tough one for me to answer. And I also feel like she did have it all kind of happen so young too that like it wasn't enough time to really
And quick.
fully kind of see. Yeah.
I feel like the NICU days just all ran together in general. It's like,
Yes,
yeah.
they did.
They definitely do.
Yeah.
Then
And
we'll move
especially this
on.
NICU, it was like a dungeon. Like it wasn't even in the basement. It was not. It was like I don't know why there was no windows. There was like it was weird.
That is
Um
weird.
yeah. But they had the best bed. So I like to we always joke that we
He looks
literally
so happy.
we peaked for beds in the NICU. Like this bed, like my husband and I, it was literally like I want to say it was bigger than a double bed almost. Like we could both fit on this thing like perfectly well with like excess space. Like both of us on this bed together. Like just mind blowing. And we've never seen anything like it. Like it's like when we both stay in her room with her since then, one of us is on this tiny bed, pull out bed or whatever you want to call them, couch flip out, whatever. And
And
then
then
the
the
other one has to
chair.
sleep in the chair. Yeah. So like we definitely peaked in the NICU. And I know for most people it's the opposite. Like they're lucky if they have a chair and some of them don't even let you
Yeah.
sleep there. And so
Yeah.
like
We
it
didn't get to
was
sleep there.
I mean, I could have, but it would have been a chair.
Yeah.
yeah, we had a Ritz-Carlton bed, so
Mm. No.
in our dungeon though. But I mean, great sleeping quarters. I mean, it was really dark,
At least you had that after everything else.
right?
Hmm.
So we'll move on to another thing that Mia deals with, hydrocephalus, which is a serious neurological condition. How did Mia's hydrocephalus develop? Like, what do you know if it was congenital or I know it was identified later, but
Mhm.
did you find any of that out?
Yeah, so Mia's hydrocephalus diagnosis was a little abnormal. She wasn't diagnosed until I see her age 4. I guess it was. And that's when she got her shunt placed. She was like 4.5 years old. She certainly had symptoms of it for at least 6 months to a year prior to that. So I would say the symptoms became kind of out there at around age 3, which honestly coincides with when her seizures also started. But she did not have any brain MRIs or any brain workups done as an infant, which is definitely something that I try to advocate for now to new
Mm-hmm.
parents is get that imaging done because even if there's not concern at birth of something going on, you can then compare to it. And so
Hmm.
like in Mia's case, we had nothing to look back on to see like if there was, you know, any of those signs on the MRI or anything like that. And so we just don't know. We don't know if it was there at birth and it maybe like her symptoms were kind of like dormant or whatever you would say and they got worse as she
Hmm.
aged, or if it was something that developed later on. We just don't know. And even if she got an MRI at birth, like I don't even know if it would have given us that answer because even her MRI now, before she had her shunt, wasn't like a total slam dunk. Like her ventricles were slightly enlarged, but if that was like her only kind of thing that they saw, they would have never intervened.
Hmm.
Her pressures were also high on her lumbar puncture. Well, I shouldn't say high. Well, they were high, but I shouldn't say like slam dunk high
Sky
either. It
high.
was
Yeah.
borderline high. So she was like having immense pain for months and months, like to the point where we're like, this is like, this is awful. Like every morning she would wake up and just be in so much pain and it would be like clockwork, like 30 to 60 minutes, and then it would kind of subside and she'd be okay. But she would always smack her head too. And we're like, this is not because of her diagnosis, like something is wrong.
Right.
And so we kept saying it and pushing. And so her neurologist admitted her actually on the day before Thanksgiving, and was that 2023? Yeah,
It's
it
like
was
going to be 6.
2023.
Yeah.
And they did a lumbar puncture on Thanksgiving Day, and her pressure was like right on the mark of high. So it was like low high. And so they're like, we don't feel like this needs a shunt today, type of thing. We're going to start you on a medication, which I think is what they like to start with to see if that'll
Hmm.
lower the pressures. And so they did that, and it changed absolutely nothing. And so then they referred us to neurosurgery, and we saw him. And in one visit, he's just like, she needs a shunt. Like, no questions asked, she needs a shunt. And we got the shunt,
Hmm.
and it was the best decision ever, because all of that pain, I said, went away like the next day, like crazy. Um, the head smacking went away. It, yeah, it was incredible.
So what would you say, like, that parents should look out for when it comes to hydrocephalus?
I would say the biggest thing is to get a ophthalmologist, so like a neuro ophthalmologist or an ophthalmologist that has experience with, you know, neurology, to a great extent. Not an
Mhm.
optometrist. Make sure you're getting evaluated by an ophthalmologist, because they will be able to see in your eyes if there is pressure. And they will then be able to advocate and get you seen by the proper doctors and kind of push things forward. I single-handedly, like, her ophthalmologist was a godsend, because she was the one that was like, she has high pressures, like this is not normal. And she was there advocating for us every step of the way. She still follows Mia. She was honestly the one that Mia had to get a shunt revision in December of last year. And again, it was the same symptoms. And so that's how we knew. We're like, she is smacking her head like crazy. She wasn't as irritable as before the initial shunt, but like she was more irritable. Like you could just tell like she was in pain. And it was like there was nothing else that was going on. And so we finally brought her in, and they did like a full workup. Of course, the quick MR that they do without sedation didn't really show any much of a change. So they didn't think it was the shunt. But then ophthalmology looked at her eyes, and they were like, her pressures are, she has palpal edema again. So they were able to see the swelling in her eyes. And so it was essentially ophthalmology that kind of told them, like, she didn't have swelling 6 months ago on her exam. She
Mhm.
didn't have swelling 3 months ago on her exam. She now has swelling. Like, what is that
Right.
from? Likely the shunt.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, they
Yeah.
did a shunt revision, which ironically, they couldn't find an actual malfunction. So they can like test all the parts, and like nothing like showed that it was like truly malfunctioning. So they're like, we don't really like, of course, they were like, we don't know if we did anything, or if that was actually the problem. But they're like, we did change the catheter. And so maybe it just wasn't draining fully, or it was clogged, because there's really no great way to test that, I guess. And sure enough, within maybe 5 days, it was like her pain had subsided. She also wasn't able to get her eyes to go out, like together, because that was something the ophthalmologist even asked. They're like, is she getting her eyes to the side? And we're like, you know what? Now that you say that, no. Within like 5 days, she was moving her eyes perfectly again. So I mean, it was definitely something with the catheter, and it was ophthalmology that really, really kind of drove that. So that would be my biggest thing to say is make sure your child is established with ophthalmology. Make sure that they're looking for palpal edema. And if they see even the slightest palpal edema, ask a lot of questions. Um, and if they write it off, I would definitely get a second opinion. And then the next big thing I would say is definitely just like pain. If there's pain that you cannot pinpoint to something else, like start looking at like the neuro piece, and see if they're willing to do like an MRI and look at the ventricles and stuff like that.
Yeah, and a therapist told me, because they're nonverbal, majority of our kids, is that they show pain differently. So you have to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to their different
Yes.
ways.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Mia's pain is definitely like she just kind of like whimpers and whines and she smacks her head. And she'll smack her head a little bit with like a UTI and other things, but it's like a whole nother level with
Hmm.
when it's
Yeah.
hydrocephalus pain. And also mornings. If your kiddo is having excess pain when they first wake up, that's then it kind of subsides over time. That's another big indicator. At least it was for Mia, and it is for a lot of people because first thing in the morning, your pressures are at the peak. So yeah.
Uh,
That's good to know.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like she's not a morning person. She just
Which
was
yeah,
feeling
we
pain.
thought it was that and sleep. If they're sleeping a
Yeah.
lot, which Mia like, I mean now she doesn't sleep much, but she's also older. But she did sleep a lot looking back, and we just thought it was her norm. We thought, she gets tired from all of her therapy and
Yeah.
doing all these things, and in reality, it probably was a lot of the hydrocephalus.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that Mia now has seizures and that they started around the same age. So
Mhm.
how did you first recognize that she was having seizures?
Yeah, so her first seizure was December of 2022. And I remember I was like holding her in bed and she kind of just went fully limp. And my husband was actually there too, and he saw it. And we are both just like, that was really weird. And we still didn't, I didn't really know if it was a seizure, but of course it crossed my mind. So it was at that point that we established her with a neurologist, and they scheduled her for, it was just an hour EEG. And it's kind of just out of caution, I guess, because we didn't know what that was. And it was definitely the right decision because they definitely started to pick up. And so she actually went for her 1 hour EEG, and the very next morning she actually had her first status epilepticus event. um it lasted for over 30 minutes. I had to call 911. At least I think this was that time. Gosh, I don't know. There's been so many,
There's
but
so many.
she had a very long seizure the very next day. And so, yeah, sorry, I'm going to backtrack there. So I did not call 911 that time. This one was maybe a few minutes, and we didn't even have a rescue med. We hadn't even met with a doctor yet. So like, I
Yeah.
honestly wouldn't have even known to call 911. That our first status epilepticus event where I called 911 was like 3 months later. But this happened the next day, and I knew for a fact that that was a seizure. I'm like, this is for sure a seizure. So I called. I'm like, we need to see this doctor sooner. Of course, they couldn't get us in any sooner. So then they switched us to like, it was like a sister hospital. I don't even technically know. It's like affiliated, but it's not the same hospital. They're like, well, you can see him, like next week. And so of course we took the appointment because we were desperate. And I knew, I'm like, this is not a good fit. But he did start her on a medication, which was good. But he was like, we don't need to do an MRI because we know why she's having seizures. Like AK, she has trisomy 18. That's why she's having seizures. And I'm like, okay, that's a red flag. So then I called the initial hospital that we ended up canceling the appointment to get in with him, and they weren't even taking patients anymore because they were so full. So then we went to a different doctor, who was actually very good, but very overworked. So the hospital system just didn't seem like they had proper staffing. Um, and they just weren't able to diagnose her properly. They, hooked her up to an EEG when she had that first status event, and we had to call 911. They transferred her to that hospital, and she did a 2-night EEG. But of course, it didn't show any seizures. It didn't even really show too much of, what you would expect after a long seizure like that. So he's like, I don't know if that was a seizure or not. She might have Sandifer syndrome, which is essentially like reflux. If you look it up, I'm probably butchering exactly what it is, but it's like a more severe form of reflux in like babies. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like that's not reflux. These are seizures. And so then we tried to get her into a different hospital, which was also a failure, because we tried to expedite our way in there by going to the ER when she was having a lot of seizures, hoping like we could fast track our way in to see these doctors. Total nightmare. We did get them to hook her up to an EEG. She ended up being admitted for pneumonia. So again, seizures are triggered a lot of times by illness. So she was definitely having seizures. They agreed to put her on an EEG. But of course, 12 hours later, nothing showed up. So they're like, nothing showed up. We're going to
Just
take
take
her
it
off.
off.
Yeah. And so I'm like, well, she's going to be here for a few more days. Like, why don't you just leave it on? And they,
Hmm.
no, we're taking it off. Literally within 15 minutes of removing it, she had a seizure. And even one of the residents was in there. He's like, I don't know if that's a seizure or not. I'm like, I'm pretty certain it's a seizure. Can we put her back on the dang EEG? And they wouldn't do it. So sure enough, we canceled our appointment there. And I'm like, I'm not seeing them for epilepsy. And thankfully at that point we were due to another Trisomy 18 parent actually, we were able to get an appointment at that original hospital that we had to cancel with. But it was like 5 months out. And so I'm like, we can't wait that long. Like, I don't want to stick with these doctors in the meantime when they're not even willing to properly diagnose her. And so another trisomy 18 mom talked to her doctor and she's like, can you please get her in somehow? And so they were able to squeeze Mia in with a fellow sooner. And it was from day one, they were like, we're going to figure this out. She's going to get hooked up to an EEG. We're going to remove her medication and we're going to wait. We're going to wait for her to have a seizure. And they're like, so you could be here for weeks, but we need to diagnose this properly. And thankfully, she had a seizure on day 4. Um, and it was a seizure. So, and they all looked the same. So every single one of these were seizures.
So what type of seizures does she have?
So she's officially diagnosed with multifocal seizures. So they originate in different parts of her brain. But on the EEGs, they don't like expand to her whole brain. Um, so
So is it
multifocal.
just like a little area, but in different areas?
Yeah, so like sometimes it'll start on the left side, other times it'll start on the right side. It depends on which is what where the multi comes in. If it's just like focal, normally they start in the same spot each time. But multifocal means they're starting in different areas. They did say or think she had generalized at first, because they felt that it was starting in one area of the brain and then spreading to the whole brain. But on her most recent EEG, where they actually caught like 4 different seizures, because essentially the purpose of that one was to catch multiple so they could catch trends and really kind of come up with a plan for Mia. Um, they determined that they were multifocal at that time and not generalized.
Ah, that's good. Like, so they changed up her medications with that EEG.
Yeah, so unfortunately she's on 4 medications now. So they started her on one, that first initial doctor that was blaming trisomy 18. He started her on one, and about 2 weeks later, she started having an allergic reaction. So we brought her to the ER. They said, yes, this can happen with this medication. She's allergic, took her off of it, put her on another one that most people kind of start out on, called Keppra. And so she's been on Keppra since February of 2023. And then once her seizures kind of kept picking up, I believe the second doctor we saw also added Vimpat. It was probably after her status event, her first status event. He added that. And then once she got into the hospital she's at now, they put on a third one because they were continuing to get worse. And I think that medication actually made her seizures worse. But then
Mm.
this past January, we were like desperate and we're like, these are getting out of control. So it was actually at that point that she was scheduled to get a vagus nerve stimulator put in. But of course, like there's this whole process, like they have to do a surgical workup, then you have to get scheduled, and then, just getting it like titrates up until it's like at the full settings. Like this was done on Valentine's Day or the day before Valentine's Day, and it's still not even at its full settings for Mia. And so we're like, we can't rely on that. And her neurologist agreed, and they're like, we need to start another medication. So they started her on a fourth one, and that seems to be the medication likely paired with the VNS that have really controlled her seizures. And so kind of going back to that third medication that we think may have made things worse, the new medication and that one can work together too. And so they don't know if they're working together to control her seizures or if it is just the latest one that's really controlling them. But obviously, like nobody wants to rock the boat right now
Mm.
because She is 6 months seizure free actually as of today. So we're kind of just like holding where we're at. But yes, once we added that fourth medication, it was fine for about a month, and then suddenly it was not fine, and she was basically overdosing, is probably the best way to put it. Her blood pressures were dropping, her heart rates were crashing, her temperatures were very low to where she needed interventions, just so many things. And ultimately, like, she didn't have sepsis, she had nothing that could be causing this, and they finally determined that it was these two medications, and they can interact and cause a specific level to get really high, and that level was very high for Mia. So then we had to stay in the hospital for multiple weeks to kind of like wean down on the medications to make sure those symptoms went back to normal, while also making sure her seizures did not start back up again. And it did take a really long time, but we are still seizure free, knock on wood. She's not having those symptoms anymore, so she's in a good place with kind of like the medication levels. And yeah, we're in a really good spot.
Great. Do you have any emergency seizure plans in place for her?
Yes. Yeah, so we got a seizure emergency plan. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think it was after her first status event. They gave her a rescue med for home that, normally administer a certain amount of time after your seizure, if it's still continuing, or if you have more than 3 seizures in an hour type of thing. So we did that for a while. But then recently, well, not recently, since we've been 6 months seizure free, but prior to that, so like last fall, like late last summer into the fall, it was really bad. Like we had to call 911 at least 3 times for seizures. And Mia gets brought to an adult trauma hospital. So they're very equipped for a lot of things, but children, especially complex children, is not really one of their strong suits. And so our last time that we got brought there for a seizure did not go very well. And so it was at that point that thankfully the hospital actually responded well, and they actually put together like a community plan for Mia. And Mia's epileptologist also put together a more in-depth like seizure plan for her, where it's not just like, okay, if your child's seizing for this long, give them this rescue med. If they're still seizing after this long, call 911. And then you just expect the paramedics and wherever they get brought to kind of handle it from there. They put together an elaborate plan where it's like, give this at 5 minutes. If she's still seizing, give this at 10. Call 911 at this point. If she's still seizing, make sure they administer this in the ambulance. Once she gets to the hospital, have them call this number, make them, they have to start this medication. If she's still seizing after giving that, like just a whole plan, step by step. And so then that hospital actually put that in her like community plan too. So then they had it. But also like if we were traveling or something, like we always kept a copy of it. So then we can say like, here, this is what you need to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so Mia has probably a more in-depth seizure action plan that I would say the vast majority of people probably have. And it's just because her seizures got really complicated, and really cumbersome with kind of where she would go and stuff like that, kind of late last year.
Yeah. So that was it because like part of it was her seizures were changing over time or in frequency or intensity.
No, I don't think it was really that, because her seizures always presented similar, but they were lasting longer. And it actually got to the point where like our home rescue meds were not working. And so it was like she would be seizing all the way to the hospital, and then it would be like, okay, what should we give her? Or she would come out of them on the way there. And her seizures are very like, they're very obvious in her movements if you know her and stuff like that. But like to somebody that doesn't know her and just kind of knows her diagnosis, they're like, well, maybe that's normal. Like maybe those are her normal
Mm-hmm.
movements.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of always like a guessing game of like, like the paramedics are like, do you feel she's still seizing? And like I would always have to make the call. And it just,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, yes, she is still seizing. And it just got very like, I don't know. And so I'm like, I don't want to be the one making the call on when you give her a medication on top of telling you she's still seizing. Like, I want you to at least know what you're going to do next, you know?
Yeah,
And
it
so like
Right.
makes you not
having,
it makes you not feel safe because you're the one that has to
yeah,
make the call, but they're the ones that are, you know,
yeah.
have the
And so it was like,
experience.
we even got to the point where we were like questioning ourselves. We're like, are these, and I think even her doctor was like, you know, that's why we did another very long EEG. I think she was hooked out for like 9 days, because they ultimately wanted to see exactly what was happening because we kept saying like she's having these long events, they're not responding to rescue and this and that. And honestly, she did have a seizure, and her doctor was like, it looks like it was only like 30 seconds. And so we're like, okay, maybe we can't tell when they end. So then, of course, we had questions. We're like, so what do we do now? Like, how do we know when they end? Because she was still doing the same movements. So
Mm-hmm.
then she's like, well, that's why we're going to keep her hooked up longer because we want to get trends and we want to really see what she does once we don't see it on the EEG anymore and stuff like that. And they then presented her case. I think she had one more seizure, and they presented her case to the whole epilepsy team at one of their meetings. And it was determined that she was seizing for as long as we said she was. So, like, those movements when we're like, well, if that's not a seizure, then like, what is she doing? Like, how are we ever going to know when it
Right.
ends? Those were all like the whole time it was a seizure. It wasn't like postictal, where you know sometimes you still do some movements once the seizure is stopped. It she was seizing. So we kind of got like good news at the start of that admission for the EEG because we're like, okay, well, it's great that she's not seizing as long as we thought she was. But we're like, but what do we do? Because like, how do we know when it ends now? And
Yeah.
sure enough, unfortunately, we got the bad news that we were correct. The seizures were as long as we thought. Um, so that's ultimately why we did that because like it got to the point where they're like, "Are you sure she's seizing?" And we'd be like, "Yeah, we're
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure." And so we're like, "Maybe she's not. Are we crazy?" You know? So that was
Makes
really
you question.
reassuring. Like her seizures definitely present a little bit differently, but they are very like if you know Mia, like you know, like she's moving, like she's doing full blown arm movements. She's like thrusting. She's also just like staring blankly a lot. And like we always kind of tell when she's coming out of it because we'll give her like one of her favorite toys. And if she's actively seizing, she'll just drop it. And once she kind of grasps onto it and like is like, oh, here's my toy, I'm gonna start playing with it. Like that's when we're like, okay, I think she's coming out of it.
Hmm.
But kind of towards the last fall, even early January, she was starting to cluster seize. So she was then tricking us where like she wasn't doing this prior to that. She would come out of it for a few minutes and then all of a sudden it would be happening again, which complicated it even more because we're like, oh my gosh, like now we're really confused.
Yeah.
So they got very complicated once they started clustering and for how long they were lasting and how weird they were presenting. And we kind of rallied all the troops. Her doctors were great. They put together a whole plan. I mean, they never didn't believe us. They were always like, you know, we just need to be sure. We need to kind of catch them.
Before they can like
Um,
Right.
take
yeah, so we can
steps.
properly guide and figure out what to do. And then even the adult hospital she gets brought to, like I said, like once I kind of took our experience to them, they took it seriously and wanted to make sure, you know, they are equipped for the next time. And thankfully, there has
Mm-hmm.
not been a next time
Next
since
time.
then. So we're all prepared now. Everyone's on board. And thankfully, we haven't had to activate it or use it.
No
That's
testing it
awesome,
out
though, that they all came together.
yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
lots of advocating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Mia ultimately ended up with a VNS. Would you explain what that device is and how things have been going since this decision?
Yeah, so it's essentially a vagus nerve stimulator is what it stands for. And so it's basically like this system that goes on the vagus nerve, which is one of the vital nerves in the body that controls like all the bodily functions, you know, all of that stuff. And so it is continuously like firing. So, you know, like I don't even know the intervals, but like there's specific times and X amount of minutes that it'll like kind of activate. So it's continuously kind of like firing and trying to keep your body out of seizures. But if she were to actually have a seizure, we have a magnet actually. So it actually part of the device goes in the chest and then it connects to the vagus nerve. So if she were to start a seizure, we have to swipe the magnet on this device in her chest that then sends a signal to her vagus nerve and like stimulates it. And the thought process is it's supposed to help take you out of the seizure. Um, and you do that every minute. So like say, a minute goes by, she's still seizing, you swipe it again. And you essentially just do that. It's just kind of part of your rescue plan, in a sense. And so while the vagus nerve is always working too, you can also give it like that extra boost if they go into a seizure. And again, thankfully, we haven't even had to swipe hers. I mean, we've swiped it just so they can show us like this is what you have to do and stuff like that. But it's honestly like the best way to explain it is it's a pacemaker for the brain.
Yeah.
So it can refire and like calibrate your brain if it's starting to go into a seizure. And it's basically a device that it's a battery, so it does have to be they have to go in there and change the battery out. Like I think right now
Like a
they're
pacemaker.
lasting. Yep, they're lasting like 7 years or so, 5 to 7 years. And they essentially just hook it up to like an iPad. So she goes once a year to this specific doctor on the epilepsy team. She'll hook her up to the iPad. They'll be able to check the battery level, make sure everything looks okay, and then, yeah. So, and then the hope is actually eventually, so maybe the next time they have to change Mia's, they're currently, I guess, working on like a lifetime one where you won't have to change the battery. So the hope is that that will hopefully be an option when they have to go in there when Mia's battery is
Well,
dying.
now with pacemakers, they're cordless. They have cordless ones now too.
Yeah, technology
So
and
it's like
advancements are just crazy.
it
So
So does
is.
she only have one magnet? Like if she does have to goes and has a seizure, like or do you have to send it with her to school,
so we
or do you have
have
multiple
like
ones that you
three.
leave?
That's a
Yeah,
good
there's
question.
Yeah, we have like three of them, I think, and we could probably even get more if we wanted. Like they have so
Mhm.
many of them there. It's literally just like a magnet. It's like a thicker one. But yeah, we have three. So I keep one in her backpack, I keep one in her like diaper emergency bag, and then I keep one in the living room. So then, we always kind of have one
Somewhere.
relatively
Right.
ready if we need it. Um, and it's actually interesting because for hydrocephalus, Mia has a reprogrammable shunt, which actually you can't have magnets by the shunt, or you can actually reprogram the shunt. And so it's funny that she has something like she basically has a magnet in her body,
Hmm.
but it does not have any interference with the shunt. Because that was like my first thing when
Yeah.
we were looking at a VNS. I'm like, I don't know if she can have that because of the magnet. And her
Right.
neurosurgeon was like, nope, we got plenty of kids that have a shunt and a VNS. They're like, if that's
They
what's
didn't
being
tell you like
recommended,
maybe
go
you
for it.
have to like keep the magnet away, like so far
Well,
away,
yeah, like
or
they don't want us to like put it by her head. But like as long as it like if we swipe it on her chest, like it's not gonna cause any issues. But yeah, like most magnets, so like we can't let Mia play with magnets. Like if she's ever using something with a magnet, like we have to be right there like helping her because if she like were to do this,
Hmm.
yeah.
it could potentially reprogram the shunt and then she would essentially get symptoms of shunt failure because
Right.
hers wouldn't be draining properly.
Hmm.
um it's the same with like an MRI. Every time she gets an MRI they have to come reprogram it because the magnet of the MRI resets it
Oh,
and
really?
changes the settings.
I never thought of that.
Yep.
Because
Hmm.
Gunner has a cochlear implant, and the magnet it can't like he can go in the MRI machine because it's MRI compatible.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah,
the
my pacemaker is too.
yeah, a programmable shunt or a reprogrammable one cannot go in an MRI. Well, it can go in an MRI, but they have to recalibrate it. So neurosurgery
Right.
always have like you always have to have neurosurgery available to do it afterwards. The shunts that like they set the setting, it's just a one setting when they put it in, like those can go in MRIs. But this is like magnet. And it's crazy because they put this thing on her head and it's literally like a magnet and they just twist it and they'll go to the right spot. I'm just like the first time I'm
Okay.
like, can you show me that? Because like I just want to make sure it's like where it's
Like, what are
supposed to
you
be. Like I
doing?
don't trust you. Like you're a neurosurgeon, but like, are you sure you have enough education for this? Because this seems sketchy.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So like, um, do you have things that you can use to like monitor her at night in
Yeah,
case
so
she
I mean,
has one?
yeah, so for the longest time she was just on, like, we had like the baby monitor and then the pulse oximeter. And like we don't have night nursing or anything because Mia's always been a very good sleeper. So it just was never that's never been a need for us. So we just keep her on the camera, we can hear her alarms, we go running in there if one goes off, whatever. And honestly, like Mia's seizures for the longest time would always happen between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m., like clockwork. So we would always know if we make it through the morning, it should be a solid day. That's
Oh, we're
another thing that,
good.
yeah. And that's another thing too, that like the last year of her seizures really being bad was starting to change. Her seizures were in the afternoon, in the evening, like just different times. And I think the scariest thing for us was there was one morning where I think her feeding pump or something was going off. And so my husband went in her room to turn that off and she was having a seizure. And of course, like it, we didn't see anything on the camera because she wasn't really making noise. She normally doesn't have vital sign changes, at least at the onset, for, a while. Like sometimes her oxygen will dip a little bit to where she might need a couple liters, but nothing significant. And many times, like, she doesn't even go below like 90 to where it may not even set her pulse ox off. So had he not walked in there for something else, we would have never known. And so that scared us because we're like, oh my gosh, like how often has this happened? And so it was at that time that her epileptologist recommended we reach out to an organization called Danny Did. It's the Danny Did Foundation, and one of their big things that they do is they help pay for seizure monitoring devices. And so there was one device in particular. So there's various devices like for adults and stuff, that have seizures, like there's watches, there's different things you can wear and stuff like that. Obviously, some of this stuff is just not going to work for Mia. And she always has somebody with her throughout the day. So our biggest concern was at night.
Nice.
And so there's one recommendation. It's called a SAMI monitor, SAMI. And essentially it's like a camera that's on her and then it's connected to an iPad and it has like its own Wi-Fi network. So like we got a router with it. You hook it up to that and it essentially monitors Mia's movement. So you can change the settings so it like isn't alarming, like because sometimes a lot of times it alarms and there's not a seizure, like it picks up on movement. So we've
Yeah.
kind of learned to set our alarms to where like it honestly alerts us when she's awake too, which is good. But it can catch seizures and it will record. So anytime it notices movement, it records. And so if Mia, like that morning that we saw her having that seizure, it would have alerted us. And so anytime her alarm goes off, I roll over and I'm like, okay, she's just awake. No big deal. Or like that's a seizure. Thankfully, she's not had a seizure on this monitor. But for many people, it's how it catches them. You can also go back. So, this isn't really Mia's situation because her seizures are usually longer, but people that have really short seizures that last a few seconds to 10 seconds, whatever it may be, they can go back and review the footage from the night before and be like, oh my gosh, my child had 25 seizures last night. And then they can send those videos to their doctor. And kind of help facilitate like, okay, what do we do now? So yeah, we have the SAMI monitor and thankfully we got it through this wonderful organization. For anyone that's listening, it's the Danny Did Foundation, and you you know they respect kind of all special needs families, so it's not like you have to be well under income or anything to qualify. Like they're pretty lenient with, like, they recognize that families are going through a lot no matter what they're making. So even if you're like middle class and you're just struggling and you're like, I can't afford this $1,200 camera because most of
Yeah.
us can't, they will still highly consider you for this grant. And so I would encourage you check them out if your kiddo is having seizures, because there's a good chance they probably would help you out with getting that device, because they definitely recognize that people probably wouldn't be able to purchase them without help like that. So
Right. I'm sure they're expensive.
yeah, I think it was like $1,200 or something.
Yeah.
So definitely would not have been something that we would have gotten without their help because, you know, what we were doing was working, but it wasn't very, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Reassuring. This monitor, I feel
Mhm.
like just really helps alleviate some of the
So
like
you can get
nerves
good
and
rest at night too.
yeah, for sure.
Oh, sounds like everything's going great on the seizure end now, which is excellent for you and Mia. Um,
Yes.
Mhm.
we can move on to her. She has pancreatic insufficiency,
Mhm.
which can make digestion and weight gain difficult. How did this diagnosis for Mia come about?
So gosh, I would say this again was like a 2-year-old type of diagnosis. She was just not gaining weight. It would be like if she gained an ounce, it was a miracle. And she was always having very loose stools. And it was to the point where like we would put her in her car seat and she thought that she was on the potty. Every single time we put her in her car seat, she would explode. And I'm just talking like a slight explosion. Like this would be like head to toe. So we would have to like build in like an extra 30 minutes anytime we went anywhere because it was almost a 99% chance there would be an explosion. And so I'm just like, this just can't be, this is not
Not
normal, you
normal.
know? Like, but of course, like another issue is finding a GI doctor that specializes in this area, and the pancreas and pancreatic insufficiency is like so hard to find. But we and it's honestly a simple stool test, which is how you diagnose this. So we did have a decent GI at that time, and they did a stool sample. They found she had pancreatic insufficiency, and they started her on an enzyme, which this actually coincides with her seizures starting. So she started on an enzyme in December of 2022 when she first started having seizures. And the enzyme, like, there's no enzymes that are made for G tubes, really. Well, I shouldn't say no because we are on one now, but it was a nightmare to find this one. And it's actually hard to like keep it in stock. Like sometimes like, thankfully, the manufacturer is wonderful and they'll send us like batches of it occasionally, which has kind of kept us going when like the pharmacies always take like a week longer than they need to get it in. It's terrible. But they started us on one Creon, which is one of the main ones that most people go on with this, and we had to like grind it up because it couldn't go through a G tube. And even with grinding it, we still clogged, I think, 4 G tubes in about a week. And it was just a nightmare. Um, so we were finally like, you need to figure out like there's got to be a better way. And it honestly made her symptoms worse. Like her gas was like out of
Unbelievable.
this world. Like it was terrible. And so her doctor's like, okay, I found this one that it does work through a G tube, but we need to upsize her G tube. So thankfully they were able to do that in clinic. No real big issue. Upsized her G tube. She got on this new pancreatic enzyme and it's worked flawlessly. She's now been on it since January of 2023. She's gained like I don't even know how many pounds. Like I want to say she was like 18 pounds when she started on it, and now she's
She's
like
what,
37.
36, 37?
Yeah, she's nearing 37. And so it's like just like she's just
That's
almost
almost
like
20
she's
pounds.
like she was actually on a diet at one point because she was so, she was a little bit chunky. I mean, she's still chunky, but like her BMI was too high. And like that, I just never envisioned that being the case. Also, her stools became more formed. We weren't having those explosions. And so it was definitely the right diagnosis, but it also kind of brought on another kind of question mark for Mia because pancreatic insufficiency, while the research is showing it can happen in trisomy 18. It's still kind of rare, even in trisomy 18. But it a lot of times is tied to cystic fibrosis. And so when Mia was born, naturally she tested positive for cystic fibrosis on her newborn screen. But we were reassured that she was super small and it's common to get a false positive when they are smaller. And so they're like, we'll just do a sweat test when she's old enough to sweat and, rule it out. So I want to say like maybe at 3 months, she was able to get enough sweat. They ran it negative for cystic fibrosis. We thought that that was a thing of the past. Then she was diagnosed with pancreatic insufficiency. So of course it was brought up again. And they're like, we should probably do another sweat test. So they did another sweat test. Again, it was negative. But still, the conversation still kind of lingered. Maybe there's a mutation, or, I feel like she has cystic fibrosis. Like something just is telling me she does. Like there's too many things. And so we finally did whole genome sequencing, and they ran it for anything related to CF and the pancreas and stuff like that, and everything was negative. So we can officially say she does not have cystic fibrosis. We did do an MRI finally of her pancreas, which maybe doing that like 2 years ago would have been smart,
Yeah.
because we found that her pancreas is actually underdeveloped. And so that is why she has pancreatic insufficiency, because her pancreas just doesn't have the same development. Like it's not working to its full capacity, essentially. And so that's her reason. Like there's no underlying condition. Her pancreas is just underdeveloped, likely due to trisomy 18, because things just don't always develop properly. And that's ultimately why she has pancreatic insufficiency. They said she'll just remain on enzymes for life. It's good that she's doing so well with them. And now we basically just have to monitor her closely for possibly developing diabetes. But of course, there's really not a lot of information out there on this. So they said,
Just
not to
watch
be
her.
overly worried about it. Like, it's not like there's a sure guarantee she's going to get diabetes. They said there's a very good possibility she will not. But we're just going to be on the cautious side and make sure we're checking like her A1C and stuff, more frequently and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's her pancreatic insufficiency journey and um, all of that.
You mentioned Mia has a G tube, and that she used to eat by mouth a little bit when she was a baby. What was it like transitioning to tube feeds, and how did that change her nutrition and energy levels, especially after you figured out the pancreatic insufficiency?
Yeah, so she had a OG tube and NG tube, and then we got her G tube. And she, did pretty well eating orally. There was actually a good point there where we were trying to like wean her off of the G tube, and she was doing pretty well. But again, this was before we had the diagnosis of the pancreatic insufficiency, so she was just not gaining weight. And so then we were like supplementing like in between feeds, and then she wouldn't be hungry, and we just eventually gave up. We're like, this is just
Mm-hmm.
not, it's not worth it. And we felt like we were taking away time from her other therapies and stuff like that by trying to force feed her for like 45 minutes to an hour. We're like, it's not working for her. It's not working for us. So we eventually kind of backed off, and we realized it wasn't for us. But in that time, we did want to try to transition her off of kind of like more of the blended like bag feeds or whatever you want to call them that you get from like the DME or whatnot. And so we were looking at blending her food for her, and we thought maybe that would help her, like, because this was simultaneously before we got the diagnosis of the pancreatic insufficiency. We didn't know why she wasn't growing. We didn't know. So we're like, well, maybe getting her off of that and putting her on, the more natural stuff would help. And so actually we ended up starting to blend for her because it was a process to learn it and to really get going. And so at the same time of us basically starting to blend is when we did get that diagnosis of pancreatic insufficiency. So she basically started on enzymes at the same time as when we started to blend her food. So it's really hard to say like it's the blended food that for sure kind of helped. But I do think kind of like in together, like in tandem, I feel the blended feeds mixed with treating the pancreatic insufficiency has really helped her. Um, and so yeah, we blend her food. I got to give props to my husband because he is the master blender and he typically blends it. I only do it if he's not available. He loves it, which I'm glad because I don't love it. So it's like his thing. So it's working for us, and as long as he's enjoying it, we're gonna keep doing it, I guess.
There you go, Robert. Do you feel the G tube has been an important part of Mia's growth and development?
For sure. I mean, I always joke that like I wish I could just have a G tube because then I could make sure I'm eating healthy and I wouldn't care how certain things taste. I would just know they have the
Yeah.
nutrient value that I need. And so I just feel like it's a lifeline for many of our kids to, you know, be able to get them what they need. I mean, honestly, like the mixture we make up for Mia, like it doesn't taste terrible. But it's probably not the mixture that I would sit there and drink like a smoothie. No, I would if I had to, but like it doesn't taste that great. But she's the healthiest eater in our entire family.
All right.
Because she's not she's not needing to get the fulfillment from ice. Well, she does like ice cream, but like she does do taste and stuff, but like she doesn't need chicken nuggets. She doesn't need
Yeah.
donuts. Like, and people are like, well, that's like food is life. Like, I mean, food is like it's great.
Food is
But like she
life.
doesn't know any better, like she
Yeah.
doesn't like everyone's always like, oh, they're missing out. But it's like, are they though? Like they don't like if they don't really
They don't even
know.
know.
Yeah. So it's like I think it's the best decision. Like even when we were going through like the tube wean process and she was doing very well, I don't think she ever really enjoyed it. It never she really didn't. And now it's yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's been the best thing. It's helped her grow. I couldn't imagine trying to get her to eat what she needs every day.
Especially with all
And
this.
like I just remember the stress of that time and I'm just like she needs to eat this many calories. Like this is so many calories. And then we were adding like oils and like all this
Right.
nasty stuff to
Yeah.
it because we needed to make it so many calories and so much fat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like this is not like this is defeating the purpose. Um and I remember being like afraid of the G tube too, like when we were in the NICU and the discussion was, about getting one and making it permanent. But it honestly, like a G tube is like the easiest thing ever. It's like nobody even knows it's there unless they see you feeding them. It's really not like it's rare to have any like complications with it.
Hmm.
Like the most is maybe a little bit of rubbing and stuff that you can treat with topical stuff.
Yeah, you
Um,
just keep it
so,
clean.
so yeah, definitely a big piece of help for many kids with Edwards syndrome.
It also
Uh,
helps with medicines and things. What
Yeah.
kid wants to take a
Yes.
medicine by mouth?
Yeah,
We
Mia's
don't
on
have to
like
fight them.
yeah, Mia's four seizure meds. I couldn't even imagine trying to get her
Right.
to take those orally. Like, and they have to be timed. Like, you need to give those meds at like a certain time. Like, you can't try for two
Yeah.
hours to get them to take these meds. Like,
What if
we
they
have like a
spit it out?
30
Then
minute
there you
buffer.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
they
we have a
spit it
30-minute
out and
buffer. Exactly. It's like the med has to be given either, 6 o'clock. We can give it as early as
Mm-hmm.
5:30 or as late as 6:30, but outside of that parameter, it's just like too
Right.
dangerous. So like I couldn't imagine trying to force it in orally. I mean it's tough with my typical child. Like she won't take Mucinex because she says it tastes disgusting. And like she actually will take it and then like one time she actually threw up. She gagged herself and like I'm
mental
just like
game.
and this is just, a medication because she's not feeling the best, like not a life-saving one. Like obviously if it was
Mm-hmm.
something for life-saving measures, like I would make sure she gets it, but it's like they're just very needed.
She may have gotten
Mm-hmm.
enough. It just
Oh no, she did not. The Mucinex, no. It was everywhere.
so next we have is talking about apnea. Mia experiences apnea. Like, how was it diagnosed, and what type does she have?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think back to when she was actually diagnosed. Again, it takes a while for certain things to happen when they're discharged, at least for us. Like I feel like looking back now, a lot of these things should probably be done before being discharged to the NICU. And so in
Yeah.
hindsight, I think it's why we had a shorter NICU stay than most. We were only in the NICU for 37 days, which is pretty short, especially seeing as she had a heart surgery in there. I mean, thankfully everything worked out for Mia, but like in hindsight, like we should have had an EEG, we should have had an airway evaluation. Like there's a lot of things that should have happened And so I would always tell people to make sure they're getting those done. So we didn't have the airway evaluation done until, gosh, I'm trying to remember, like, I don't know, because COVID happened.
Oh,
She was
wow.
born
Yeah.
July of 2019. She got her surgery, her open heart surgery was done December of 2019. And then we scheduled her for her G tube because they wanted to do the heart first. And so we
Mm-hmm.
scheduled her G tube for March 5th of 2020. I don't remember the exact date the world shut down, but I
Right around
vividly
that time.
remember, yeah, I vividly remember a conversation with one of her nurses. I'm like, "Are you worried about this?" And he's like, "No, it's all a farce. Like, it's nothing. It's just China. Like,
Yeah.
it's not gonna be here. Like, don't worry about it." And then like a week later, the world shut down. So thankfully, she got her G tube. But then it was like they weren't doing anything for many months. So I don't remember. I think she had an eye surgery done November of 2020. And I'm thinking maybe they did her first scope then. But I honestly don't even know. It was in late 2020 or 2021. They did a scope. They saw that she had slight apnea. But they felt that, and then she did get an EEG done. And she was doing okay on oxygen. So she was just on oxygen for a while. But then it was like, I'm like, I feel like she needs more than just oxygen. So then we kind of advocated. They did another sleep study, or they did another scope actually. I think it was her second scope. And then that's when they saw that her tonsils were enlarged. So they removed the tonsils, or sorry, adenoids first. They removed the adenoids. Her tonsils still weren't super enlarged. So they didn't want to take those yet. And her apnea actually got significantly better for a few months, but then it got really bad again. And so then I think she may have switched to CPAP. I think she switched to CPAP at that point, and then they did another scope like another year later, and then her tonsils were super enlarged. So then they took her tonsils. Um, and then, yeah, she remained on CPAP. They were kind of hoping that maybe it would resolve and she wouldn't possibly need the CPAP anymore. But that was unfortunately not the case for Mia. So she remained on the CPAP and was on CPAP until actually just last week, when they switched her over to BiPAP. And the reason for that is because she has been kind of struggling to get air out. And so essentially BiPAP gives a different level of pressure breathing in versus breathing out, whereas CPAP is like one continuous pressure. Like her doctor actually explained it really well. Like CPAP is like, picture yourself as a dog sticking your head out the window. Just the continuous air coming at you, that's CPAP.
Yeah.
BiPAP will change the setting based off of like if you're breathing in or breathing out and stuff like that. So they felt that even though like her settings weren't super high, they felt that that would help her be able to breathe out a little bit better. And so she got switched over to BiPAP just last week, and she has stayed on the same machine and everything like that. And so far so good.
Getting it all down.
Mm-hmm.
So, you mentioned the explosions. So does she also get like UTIs, urinary retention?
Yeah, so she's always had UTIs. I would say like 2 to 3 a year has been kind of her trajectory. However, that did start to change. She got her first urodynamic study, which essentially is a study that tests like your pressures in your urinary area, and it can tell you how large the bladder is, how it's emptying, all of that stuff. She had one of those like 3 years ago, and her pressure was fine, but she was like retaining. However, her doctor at the time was like, you could start to cath, but he's like, I don't feel like it's one of those things where I'm going to tell you have to cath type of thing. So he's like, I'll let you make the decision. I think she's perfectly safe without cathing still. And so we were kind of afraid of cathing at that point. So we're like, no, we're going to keep going. And again, she just kind of still kept getting the 1 to maybe 3 a year UTIs. Treat them, everything would be fine. Fast forward to last April, when we were trying to figure out her seizures, and she started on the keto diet. Well, the keto diet made her stop urinating entirely. And again, another Mia mystery where the urologist and the neurologist were like, we've never seen this. It's not the keto diet. Like, she has neurogenic bladder. Something else triggered her to just stop urinating entirely. I'm like, but this is not seeming right. Like, I get it. She definitely does have neurogenic bladder, and like we know that for certain now. But I'm like, she's not getting any urine out, like none. And so like we ended up having to start cathing her, and it was around the clock, like every 4 hours, because she was not urinating at all on her own. And so we started doing that, and then 3 months later, she was hospitalized for something else, and we actually advocated to stop the keto diet. I'm like, because she actually needed a GI workup, so she was already doing a colonoscopy and all cleared out. So I'm like, can we just switch her back to a different diet once she starts eating again? And they agreed to it. And within 3 days of doing so, she started urinating fully on her own. So our answer was the keto diet either constipated her so bad that
It
we
blocked.
didn't even, yeah, like, and it's crazy because like she was still pooping the same amount as she was before the keto diet, but like we don't know if it maybe constipated her so bad that like pooping 3 times a day, maybe she needed to poop 10, I don't know. But like that's the only thing I can think of, or it did something else neurologically that just stopped her from
Yeah.
urinating that nobody has ever done in the world that's been studied. I don't know, but we're like, the keto diet is not for her, and it also didn't really help her seizures much, so it was kind of a easy decision. um so we had like a solid 6 months where we didn't have to cath her at all. But then, something else would happen. Like she would get a UTI, and then she would need to be cath more, or she would get sick, or something would happen. And like it was like she would kind of get set off, which did tell us she had neurogenic bladder. And so we did do another urodynamic study, and they saw on that one that her bladder was massive. It could hold like 300 cc's of urine, which for her age, I think it was like 100 something, that is what it should have held. So it was very large. So ultimately, they think that that's the cause of her UTIs, is she's just not fully emptying her bladder. So she's retaining, it's
It's
sitting in there
just
for too long, and
brewing.
it's just, yeah. But then it kind of complicates things more because it's like you're also introducing bacteria when you cath. So it's like a catch 22. Which is better? Do you just let her retain some? Do you cath her? So we've kind of been battling that now, because we often, like, she gets UTI still, even with cathing her. And a lot of times it's like, well, is this a real UTI or is it not? And Mia's weird sometimes where her urinalysis is perfect, but then her culture will grow something. And she's having clear UTI symptoms from what we know Mia's symptoms are. And I feel like that's always an argument. Like, we don't feel like this should be treated, but, we're like, but she's having clear symptoms that she normally has. We feel like it does. They'll treat it, and then the symptoms go away. So that's kind of been hard to navigate. Thankfully, her
What are
last couple,
Mia's signs and symptoms?
fussiness, that's her biggest one, and vomiting. Fussiness and vomiting, I would say, are the biggest two, and then retaining more urine, and urine, the smell. It's a distinct smell. Now her last two UTIs have actually been different, where her urinalysis have shown bacteria and leukocytes and nitrites and stuff that do give a clear indicator that it's a true infection and not like a colonization or something like that. So thankfully, like, we haven't had to like advocate hard to treat those. But prior to that, we've run into issues where like the UA is crystal clear. And we're like, there's nothing else going on. Like, we feel like this has to be a UTI, and then the culture will grow something. And it's kind of like, well, should we treat it? Should we not? And then they would eventually treat it and her symptoms would go away. So it's like a very delicate balance. We thankfully have built up a good relationship with her urologist. We kind of had a rocky start, but she's kind of gotten to know us and we've gotten to know her. And I feel like usually things are pretty smooth now, and good, but it's definitely a very, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the urology piece. It's just very, I don't know. And I don't even know what the right answer is. We kind of do our own thing with, I mean, we take the doctor's guidance, obviously, but like we mainly cath like morning and night, and then she urinates very well during the day, but it's also like, okay, she's still retaining some, like she'll have ginormous diapers. And it's like, do we really want to cath her when she just had a diaper that's like
Yeah.
200 cc's, So it's like it's a very delicate like balance of like what is best here. And of course you can't get a bladder scanner through insurance. So we bought like a ghetto one off of eBay, and it does work, but it's it's not something that's super ideal to like bladder scan her, like, oh, how much has she retained, to determine if we should also cath her. So we kind of have
Mm.
just like set up our cath her morning, night, and then like obviously when she has UTIs, we're cathing her more, or if she's not going as much, we're cathing her more. Um, so yeah, that's kind of our urinary journey.
The Mia puzzle, all these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about one more medical piece and we'll get into Mia herself and her daily life and things like that. Um, so you told us before the podcast started that Mia has conductive hearing loss. How did you first notice Mia's hearing challenges and what kind of testing was done to determine that she had that type of hearing loss?
I mean, our first thing was in the NICU. They did the typical hearing thing, and they're like, she failed. And then they brought her back in the next day, and she failed again. And so I was like freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like, she can't hear at all. But turns out like that doesn't mean that they can't hear at all. It just means they have some sort of hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she did I don't know, it wasn't a sedated one. We were able to get pretty good data just from her sleeping like in the clinic. And so it was at that point that they determined she had the conductive hearing loss. And so then she did need a sedated one in order to get approved through insurance for like the Baja band. So she first started with the Baja band, which is essentially the vibrating pieces that kind of go behind the ears. She would never keep it on. Mia is a sensory seeker, so she's always shaking her head.
Yeah.
And it would just come right off. We were able to get her to kind of wear it like a coal miner, like one of them, anyways, some, but even that was falling off. So eventually I was like to the audiologist, I'm like, there has to be something else you can do. Like, this is not working. And so she's like, well, we could probably try like traditional hearing aids. She's like, usually it's not recommended with this type of hearing loss, but we can try it. And so we tried it, and she got these hearing aids, and it was like, you could just tell like the world changed for her,
Mm-hmm.
how much better she was hearing and stuff. And in hindsight, I think we probably should have had another ABR, because that was like 3 years ago now. And then kind of Mia's medical stuff really picked up over the last 2 years. And so we didn't want to do a sedated ABR at that time. But in hindsight, we really should have, because we actually just did it's called a Hear Lab. It's like a special hearing test that you don't have to be sedated for, but they can tell how well your hearing device is working. And so they were able to tell that without her hearing aids on, she's hearing nothing. But with her hearing aids on, she's hearing loud sounds, but she's not hearing medium or low sounds. And so we don't know how long that's been going on. I know at one point the school like turned down her hearing aids. So like I don't know if that messed with it. I don't know if they were never calibrated fully. Because I don't think we did an ABR after she got them. Because we were
I
like, it
thought they
seems
were
like she's
supposed
hearing well.
to
They
go
might
off.
have. What'd you say?
I know with Emma, they go off of her testing, and that's
Yeah, and
why
that's
hers
what they
was sent.
calibrated. Yeah. And so I think they just got changed. Like looking at it now, and then we never did another ABR. So I don't know how long she's only been able to hear that much. But there's just so much going on. And so now we're scheduled to do a sedated ABR so they can recalibrate them. She's actually going to get new hearing aids too, but then they'll calibrate them to the proper settings. So we're kind of excited for that, because we're hoping she's gonna like really show that she's hearing even more once that happens. Um, so yeah, that's kind of her nutshell hearing journey.
She with the hearing loss, she has an eye gaze device
Mhm.
to assist her with communication. Like, how do you feel this helped alongside with her hearing loss?
Yeah, I mean the eye gaze she's just picked up on instantly. It was like one of those things where we just knew she would do well with it because she would always like communicate with her eyes. We could just see her moving her eyes. We just knew we're like this is gonna get her to, really speak. And so we advocated to trial one. And it was always kind of a fine line because it's like, is she really hearing? But she would answer questions. Like we would ask her something and she would be spot on with what she would say back. So we're like, we know she's hearing,
Yeah.
at least to a decent extent.
That.
And with the eye gaze, it was like you could tell that like even the people that were helping us try to get one kind of doubted. They're like, they even admitted to me after she proved she could use it well. They're like, we didn't think that she would do as well as she did. And they're like, she's just blown us away. But I think the biggest thing for Mia that really showed them that she needed this was at school. She was on her device and she kept saying, I'm gonna throw up. I'm gonna throw up. I'm gonna throw up. And they're like, okay, you just trying to get out of work. And so then they took the device away for a few minutes and she just kind of like was still like mad and showing signs of like not. So they gave her the device back again. She went right back to it. I'm gonna throw up. And then she threw up everywhere. And so they're like, this kid needs this device. And she's just kind of rocked it since then. She was actually given an award in Illinois through Infinitech. It's a like a organization that does a lot of speech devices and speech you know awareness and stuff like that. And so they do this award every year where they give like 10 to 15 kids, I believe it is, throughout the state um, this award for assistive technology. And Mia's school nominated her last year. And she was one of the selected ones to get this award. And it was really cool. She got to go to like an awards dinner. And she was featured on like WGN and the Daily Herald and stuff like that, which is really cool. So yeah, big eye gaze user. We love it. Hi, Emma.
You hear Emma
She's trying
now?
to join in.
She is. She's over there just
Give
spinning
her eye
around.
gaze and she'll be like, come on, I want to join you guys.
Right.
Mom, are you done yet? Are you done yet,
Might
Mom?
Right.
she might have a few questions herself.
Yeah.
With with such a complex care routine and all these medical things with Mia, how do you keep Mia's daily life as normal as possible for her?
I mean, we try to like we have a pretty good routine. I mean, we sway from it depending on the day, but like mostly like he has like her kind of bedtime when she's ready to go to bed. She sleeps really good through the night. 9 nights out of 10. She we know what she likes to do. Like there's like she goes to therapy and stuff, and then at home, like there's specific things that we try to make sure we get in every day. But then we just try to keep life as normal as possible. Like like we want to treat Mia like her sister and like any typical child. So while she has extra needs and we have to give her medications and she has all these appointments and there's a lot of stuff to navigate there, like we want her to also just be a kid. And so like she gets to watch her TV shows. Now a lot of it might be dictated by her sister, who is 3 and very demanding at times, but
Mm,
thankfully they like a lot of the same things. So Mia gets to watch her shows. She's sassy. She definitely tells us what she likes and she doesn't like, and we do our best to read her cues and to listen to her on her eye gaze and respect what she says. Like our theory is or philosophy is, if she says something on her eye gaze, like even if you're not sure if she meant it, like we try to get her to do it again, but like you have to honor that. Like if
yeah.
someone tells you something verbally, like you're not going to be like, you didn't mean to say that. And so
Right.
so we treat her eye gaze like her voice. And while it's a little bit extra complicated, because like I said, sometimes she doesn't say exactly what she wants, but normally like when she's on it, like she'll do it more than once. So we usually just try to get
Yeah.
her to repeat it. And if she repeats it again, it's like you have to, acknowledge that that's what she wants. So we are very persistent with that. And then we just try to include her with like we don't not live our life because of her needs. Like we went to the Indy 500 this past year. She's been to two Indy 500s now. Or no, sorry, she's been to one. We were supposed to go last year, but she was in the hospital. So just her sister and Robert went, but she went to her first Indy 500. She's been to other IndyCar races. But this Indy 500 actually she still was on antibiotics for pneumonia and for a UTI. And it was kind of like, do we go? But she was very, very much improving. And so we're like, you know what? Like, we're gonna sit at home and she's gonna be bored because like we're gonna have to find something to do anyways because she's doing so much better. So we're like, let's just live life. And so before the race, like I was doing her shake vest treatment in the back end of the van. Like, like you gotta do what you gotta do. But we did her treatments like we would have done just at home. And we still went on with our plans and it worked out perfectly. I mean, thankfully the Indy 500 for us is only a few hours away. So like, God forbid something happened, like we could have gotten back pretty quickly, but like, I don't think we would have jumped on a plane by any means or anything, but we just try to live life and, include her. Mia just likes to be on adventures with us. She just likes to be included, and be a part of our family. So I would say that's kind of how I don't even remember what the original question was, but that's how we try to keep our lives as normal as possible, even with her complexities.
You answered a lot, but do you feel her little sister Madison impacts her in a positive way, and like how?
Yes. I mean, these two are like their bond is incredible. I mean, the first thing that Madison, when she wakes up, she wants to, like, is Mia awake? Is Mia awake? And then as soon as Mia's awake, she wants to run in there, jump in her bed, give her a big hug. Um, her newest favorite thing, and Mia loves it, is Mia loves to roll. And so she will, when Mia's on the ground, Madison will go up to her and she will help her like roll really fast. And Mia's just cheesing from ear to ear. And it's like Madison knows that makes her so happy. And so she just wants to keep doing it. And anytime Mia's on her eye gaze and like Mia will say something, like Madison just gets so over thrilled because like her sister is talking, like she knows that's her voice. And she doesn't use her voice as often as us. And so it's like once she says something, like Madison just gets so much thrill out of it. And actually the other day, so we finally got this like floor device for Mia's eye gaze. And so she's able to use it in more positions. And so like instead of just using it like when we're right by her, I've been now giving it to her all the time. So like she can call for us if she wants and like stuff like that. And the other day she was actually asking for Madison. So like Madison's in the other room and she kept saying, Madison, Madison. And then like Madison just thought that was the coolest thing. And she came running and started playing with her. And like um their bond has just been amazing since day one. And it's funny because like Mia was holding Madison when she came home from the hospital, but now they're the same size, and so Madison actually now holds Mia sometimes. But we dress them alike a lot. We get asked all the time, and this has happened since Madison was a baby, was are they twins? Because Mia was super tiny at that time because it was before her pancreatic insufficiency diagnosis. And I mean now she's probably like on the growth chart like a normal size like 4-year old. And so Madison is 3.5, so like they're very very similar in size, so we still get like, oh, are they twins? And like part of me just wants to say yes, like I should just start saying yes, like they're twins.
We used to
But we're
say
always like,
yes, me and my
no, she's
brother.
almost 6 and she's 3, almost 4. But yeah, no, they're just perfect.
So you were mentioning that you like to travel. How does you mentioned a little bit how it came into play, but how does her Mia's all of her complex needs come into play with your activities? Like I know you like to go to ball games and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we love going to sporting events. Mia's been to Detroit Lions games, Chicago Blackhawks games, Chicago Cubs games, all kinds of games. And um we we've learned that we have to get a handicap spot because she needs to be in her like her wheelchair. She needs her space. So we always get handicap spots now. And we just like normally scope out like the closest family bathroom where we can change her, cath her if we need. Like at the Indy 500, we actually would just take her into like the first aid room. They just let us use those tables in there to change her and stuff. So we just kind of, sporting events, they just work out. I feel like they were harder when she was younger, actually, because she didn't have a wheelchair yet. And so, like, she was in like a medical stroller that, and she was smaller. And like, they were always like, you can't bring that in here. And we're like, this is a wheelchair. So we'd always get questioned. But I feel like now that she's older, like she's in a clear wheelchair, um, like we don't get those questions. Like normally we get treated very, very well. She can't get wanded down and stuff because of her shunt and her VNS now and stuff. And they never ask questions. They're like, nope, nope, no problem. Like they open our coolers, they barely look inside. So like we can sneak all kinds of stuff in
Don't
because
be
like they're
saying
not
that.
looking. So it's like, oh, I brought my own drinks. I'm not gonna spend $25 on yours. Because
Yeah.
they don't like they're like they see the sweet girl, coming to a sporting event. So we've kind of mastered the sporting events. And we like to do other things. We've gone to Florida a couple times where we like to drive with her because she has so much stuff. We're a little nervous to
Hmm.
fly,
Hmm.
mostly because of all the equipment and stuff. But I'm also just nervous to fly with her hydrocephalus and
Yeah.
seizures and stuff because I couldn't imagine like being in the air and having something happen. But also just traveling with all the things. I'm just like, let's just drive. Um, so yeah, we try to do as much as we possibly can with her. I mean, I can't really think of something that, we wouldn't at least give it a shot.
That's
And she
awesome.
loves
She
it.
gets
She
all
loves to
that.
just like take in all the environments and the atmospheres and um yeah, she just likes doing typical things and being included and being at all these places and getting these experiences.
Mia's a well-rounded child in many ways.
She is. Yes.
Well,
She
thank you for
loves
coming
adventures.
today.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could do this, tell her story. I could sit here for hours and hours. I feel like this has already gone probably like an hour and a half. So, yeah, there's so much there. So much to talk about with her
I know
medical,
there's
like
like a
her
lot that we could have
likes.
talked about, you know.
Yes. I think we hit the important stuff. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Amazing little warrior. Thank you for bringing her story to us so that we could share it.
Yes, glad I could.